Hi, I'm Kent.
And I'm Anna.
We're married, we make movies, and we believe that anyone in any circumstance can make a feature film.
Welcome to the Feature Filmmaker Podcast. If you want a career making movies, you're in the right place.
Hit subscribe to never miss an episode.
Let's jump right in. Hi, and welcome to the podcast today. Today we want to talk about crewing a feature film on a no or low budget production. Now, people talk about no budget productions, and that doesn't mean necessarily that it doesn't have any money behind it, but really low budget productions will often be called a no budget production. And that's basically just down to the bare basics skeleton of what you need to make a film. And when you watch movies and you see all the credits and you see tons and tons of people, or maybe you've helped out on a big set for Netflix or Paramount or some other big company, and you see how many people there are on set and each department doing so many different jobs, it can feel really overwhelming. And I get a lot of people entering into the program and feeling like, where am I going to get all these people and all this help? And what do I actually need? What role do I want to play? What is even the difference between a producer and a director? So we're just going to break it down in the simplest way we can today for you.
So I think that most of us go to high school believing myths. And I'm going to step away from film for a second. And there's all these like weird myths that happen, which is like everyone is doing drugs. You know what I mean? Like it feels like everyone is doing something or whatever. And it's just super not true. In fact, usually the majority of people are not doing the things we think, quote unquote, everyone is doing. And I think that that's really true in film. And so, Anna mentioned being on set for like big motion pictures. Now, some of you may have had that experience and some of you may have not had that experience, but we're coming from this from like you may have extra'd on a set or like PA'd on a set. And a lot of us in Georgia and LA and New York will pick up gigs like that, right? So it's pretty normal that we'd walk on a big movie, but it's not like we have a big job. And it's not like those movies are going to get us in a position to direct a film or make a film in whatever capacity, equals your dream. But I say that right up front because it can be really deceptive to think that all these people have loads of money and oodles of cash. And what I've realized is that even movies that are like full on union with A-listers, sometimes, especially art films, look very different from even like a Nickelodeon show or something like that, where you might see tons and tons of trucks for like a straight to TV release kind of, 60-minute sort of quote unquote feature film that's made for kids. And you're like, wow, they're just dumping money on this. And that's the kind of filmmaking that happens. That's more of like it's a job for everyone. You can just tell when you're on set that there's not a big load of passion behind this project. And that's okay. I mean, it's good work for everyone involved. And I'm not saying anything bad about that. But there's other filmmaking that's like deeply passionate. And usually it's these people that are trying to make something happen because they just have their heart in it. And I'm thinking of films. I think Denzel Washington, for example, is an A-list actor who's really big. And he's on movies that are unionized through the roof, right? SAG, the DP is going to be ASC and the director is going to be DGA. And yet when you get on set, I guarantee that film, a set on Fences, felt like an indie film. I mean, in some ways it might meet that indie definition, but that's a very ambiguous term. But my point is it probably felt like a very small team. And they shot on film, but they shot in like this tiny shotgun Americana house that was like period. And they didn't even have room for lights to really fit between the houses because the houses were built so close together and they weren't willing to just build a set, and so you can imagine there's not that many people that could fit in that house and there's not that many lights that could fit between the houses. And so it's going to feel a little tight and small and maybe not that crazy like we would imagine being on the set of like a Marvel movie, for example. And that's just one example. And we might give some more examples from films we've made, worked on, or even just studied and looked at. But there's crew that is absolutely essential and there's crew that isn't essential. And that all just comes down to what kind of movie you're making. And there are people making movies out of their own basement with green screens, and there's people making movies in their backyards and in their hometowns, and there's people flying to destinations with crews of 3, and every story is different. So it's just going to demand different logistics. But if you're trying to make a first feature and you're trying to do it resource filmmaking style, you can do an incredible amount of storytelling, beautiful imagery. You can execute Hollywood level imagery and Hollywood level sound and excellent acting that can hold up to almost anyone else's. And it can definitely punch millions of dollars above its weight class for little to no money. And I really believe that.
Yeah, and I think the basic thing you'll want to understand is that there are many jobs to be done. And as you start to break down your script and look at, okay, someone has to be in charge of getting this prop here, and someone has to make sure that this location is secured. You're going to want to divide that up among you and your fellow teammates. And so it can be helpful to understand departments and what each department does so that you can divide it up. Now, that's not essential. It could just be that you're like Peter Jackson and his friends, and they just, assign it out, and who cares what you call the role? It's just, hey, can you do that? And I'll do this. And we just split up the work. You can do it that informally, but it is helpful to understand departments and maybe have someone who's in charge of art. For example, that may include costume, makeup, props, set dressing. It could be all of those things. And on a super low budget first feature film, typically you'll want at least one person per department, at least. And it'd be really nice if you can get some extra help, like an assistant or a PA per each department. I'd say there's some essential departments: camera, directorial, sound, and art are probably the ones where it'd be really nice to have a PA maybe dedicated to each of those departments to be able to run errands and help bring stuff, and just AD if you're a director, you need an AD. But again, I say that, and yet you don't really need it. And with our first film, I directed and I AD'd, and we didn't have an AD, and I didn't have any assistants. And I was also a producer, and my husband was DPing, and he had one PA helping him out. And Claire White was our art production designer, and she did all of it. She did costume, makeup, set dressing, running errands on her own, borrowing her car. She just covered all of that. Props. So it can be a very small team, and you can make it work. It just requires a lot more preparation and coordination to be able to pull that off.
Yeah, and we've in past episodes gone over, like, named off our crew and explained what they did, but it ranged from day to day, from anywhere between my wife and I, right, Anna and I,
and the actors,
and whichever actors were there, which some days were one of our kids. There were days that was it. It was Anna, Kent, and one kid, and and then there were days where it was, Claire was there on art, and Chastity was either acting or doing something to do with locations or casting or payroll, or she was kind of this line producer sort of thing, hybrid.
Producerial department,
Chameleon.
but yeah.
Yeah, but you can see how, like, it got fluid, and you kind of just knew what work needed to get done. And we don't recommend doing everything the way we've done it in all of our films, especially our first film, because it was very, very stressful. But I don't think it was stressful because of the number of crew that we had. I actually think that if we went back and did that film, let's say the same story with the same logistical weight, with that exact same crew, I think we would know exactly what we would need to do differently. And so the knowledge is really more valuable than pumping or injecting the crew with just bodies, But I would say also that talent goes a lot farther than just bodies as well. So you can get extras, or you can get PAs, and you can just load the set with people, with untrained people, with students, with high schoolers or college kids, like, like freshmen in college, people who are totally willing to work for free, who are blessed by the opportunity. I'm not talking about, like, pushing people to do stuff against their wills for no money and underpaying people, but there are people who want to be on a set that's an artistic, intimate, passion-driven experience where they get lots of experience and they get to be close with the director. That's very valuable for people who are still learning. And so I think it's totally a good idea, to be frank, to reach out on whatever, Facebook or other groups, and say, hey, we've got this film going on, we need PAs, and to get a few bodies on set. But a few very competent, talented, passionate people on a team can go really, really far. And I want to use an example of a movie that actually had a $5 million budget, which you might think, why would you do that? Why would you bring that up as an example? And I'm just going to show you where that budget went. The movie I'm talking about is Nomadland, which was 2020, won Best Picture, won Best Director, won Best Actress. I thought it was exquisite. And you might look at it and think, well, that actually is kind of a bigger crew. Well, when you get to the bottom on IMDb of their extremely long credits for cast, which are really long because they credit every extra that they had. It's actually a decently small cast. Most of them were social actors. They were portraying themselves. They weren't professional actors. And then there's this producer list, which we'll skip. There's a few names on there, including the director and actress, Frances McDormand and Chloe Zhao. But I'm skipping the producer credits because those people could have been added as producers on the back end. There was definitely some production company and studios supporting this film. Those names could be coming from a lot of different places. But as far as who did the work of producing this movie, was probably a majority Chloe Zhao and Frances McDormand. And there might be one or two others. And then cinematography was by Joshua James Richards. He had, I think, one AC, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he had one AC and a gaffer. And there was a few other people who I think it looks like they maybe day played. Oh no, he had a second AC as well. I'm just reading this off IMDb right now. I've looked over it before. And then,
Well, and I know we've seen them talk about the making of this film, behind the scenes footage where Chloe Zhao talks about her team and how small it was. And that it was surprising to some of them that this was a big budget film with a big actress because
I mean, big budget
it felt,
for an indie person.
yeah,
Low budget.
bigger budget than any of us are going to have on our first
For the
film.
Coens and the McDormands, that's a very low budget. Yeah.
Yeah. But for a $5 million film, it was a very small team and it's a passionate project. And I think that works well with passion projects where there's a very strong vision. That's easier to communicate to a smaller team. When you have tons and tons of people, that can get lost and a lot of things can fall between the cracks or get lost in translation because you're going to relay what you're hoping for if you're a director for the film, and then each department head's going to relay that to their team, and then they're going to interpret that how they will and find a way to make it happen. And it can get kind of watered down in all of that lost in translation stuff. And so I think really small teams are good for people who have a really strong vision and are trying to communicate something very specific and want to be very involved in the creative process. And that's something I want to touch on today too, is just the difference between a producer and a director and what role you're going to play in your first feature film. Because a lot of people come into our Feature Filmmaker Academy and they know they want to be creatively involved in the project. They know they want some ownership on this project. They're probably not a good fit for our program if they don't feel that way. But they might not know exactly how or where they fit in. And sometimes you do. Sometimes you come in and you know, I want to be an actor, I want to be a DP, and I'm just going to make it happen for myself by making a feature film. And that's fine. If you know exactly what your position is you want to do, great. Add producer to, producer to that list, and you're ready to go. And that can work really well. But the producer is the one who has the creative ownership, is kind of at the top of the pyramid, who makes the film happen, who secures the financing, who decides who to hire in all the other positions.
Securing the financing, to Anna's point, is definitely usually the producer's job, but that can also be anybody, right?
Well, and often you'll see a director producer or an actor producer, someone who maybe is involved in that process, but that's just a matter of a means to an end. Like, I want to produce to get this to happen so that I can DP it because I really want DP, for example. But definitely, if you're going through the program, you're going to be a producer in a way on this film. You're going to be picking your team and putting this together carefully. And so you don't have to know everything about filmmaking to do this, to find team members who do, who are experienced, who can do their jobs. And even they don't have to be necessarily super experienced. They might be just friends and family who are willing to help out and want to learn. Some positions will matter more than others, how much experience they have. But is hired by the producer, for example. So if you are producing a project and you don't want to direct it, you want to do a different role, then you're going to be hiring out a director, but you still are the top of the pyramid, so to speak. You can decide to fire that director if you don't like where they're going with the vision. Hopefully you try to figure that out early on and work together and get clear on it. But then the director is the one who's going to work with all the other department heads to create a unity of vision and make sure that everyone's on the same page, everyone's working towards the same vision and not detracting from that.
Yeah. And so there are different kinds of people making these films. So Anne is describing someone who maybe, let's say that you have a script or an idea and you're materializing that and you just want it to exist. You may or may not want to direct it. And by that, I mean, you may or you may not, right? Like, I'm not saying that to like deter you from directing. You might just want to jump on that. You might have someone you know who's willing to do that. You may or may not have skills in camera, that you feel confident in. I'll be honest though, I think it's really interesting to look at the people who, there are some filmmakers who just, they take everything seriously enough that they can reduce the crew size by a significant amount because they and the very few people working with them do almost everything. and there's people who produce, they write, they DP it, they edit it. So I'll point out again, the editor on Nomadland was the director. The production designer was the DP. Like, those are rare to see those jobs smushed together. Director, editor, not as rare, but those are big jobs to, those are big hats to wear, to put on the same person.
Yeah.
And yet, you will get even big directors that will do that, but those big directors will often, like these writer, director, actors, for example, or whatever, that sometimes those movies are so well funded that they have a ton of support. I've also seen low budget films, DP, writer, producer, director, actor, editor, like did everything, and they look good, acting solid. And, Thunder Road is a great case study, which was a short film that went to Sundance, adapted into a feature film, which won South by Southwest a few years afterwards. And the director of Thunder Road said, when you realize, or when you're willing to do everything yourself, you know that you're ready to make your first feature. He said something, along those lines. I would push back against that because I don't think it's necessary that you do everything yourself. And it is possible to find and get help. It's okay to hire help, and it doesn't have to cost very much at all. But I like the attitude that, like, I felt confident in my ability on our first feature to shoot it, to DP it. I don't think I'm the greatest DP on the planet. I'm no Deakins, but I knew I could do it justice, and I could do much better than anyone else I could afford to hire with the money I had. And I knew people who were way better than me personally, but they would all cost more, And so I just did it myself, and I'm really glad that I did. Now, I also produced. On that side of things, I'd never produced. I hadn't produced a short film. I guess I technically had, but I mean, not really. I hadn't really taken a personal project and grabbed the bull by its horns. And so there's sometimes roles where we have to say, can I step into this and do it myself? That's something you're going to have to judge for yourself. What are you willing to take on? What are you willing to try for the first time? And that's at no disrespect to the medium. Sometimes I think we treat the medium like it's too holy, like, oh no, you have no right to act, or you have no right to direct, or if you haven't done that before, that's a real craft and you have to hone it. And it just depends on your confidence and how much work you're willing to do in the preparation phase. And I think that maybe last statement is the most important, is that if I could go back, we've talked about this many times, the prep is the most important. So if I'm going to produce the whole thing deeply prepared beforehand. If I'm going to DP for the first time, I'm going to really practice and prepare and test. So I feel like deep preparation on the front end is really what's going to enable you to do roles that you might not otherwise be qualified to do. And any of us can do that. We can all prepare and put a lot of time into something, especially a low to no budget passion project. So I think that is something we might need to be willing to do, is roll up our sleeves, learn new things, and get passionate, and passion fuels a lot of learning. And it's just possible. I don't think we should give ourselves that negative self-talk that tells us that we can't do it.
Yeah, and especially if this is a role that you really want to pursue in your life, you're going to have to learn it by doing it at some point. So go ahead, do it. The worst thing that can happen is that the movie fails and you learn a ton. And the next time you know so much better. So it's still completely worth it to pursue the role that you want to do as a career and practice that. And don't think that because other films have so many credits and seem like there's so many people that it has to be that way, because most big directors started out with just their friends and family and a few key positions, and you can definitely make that work.
I also would just push back against the phrase itself of the film could fail, or what does that even mean?
Yep.
It's like failure. I mean, you can give up on the film, but just decide not to do that. Run with it all the way through the entire process of pre-production, production, post-production, marketing, getting a sales agent, putting it through festivals. If that doesn't go very well, try some other way to sell it. Use it as a calling card, push it out there, There's
Get
always
a good
something.
trailer out of it at least.
Yeah, there's always something you can do to just mine as much out of the film as an asset for your career and for your bank account and pocketbook and ROIs and all that. There's a lot you can do, and you just keep with it. And the longer you keep with it, the more you're going to learn from it, which further increases the value of the film for you, as a learning experience, if nothing else. But it's very unlikely that it would be quote unquote nothing else than a learning experience, in my opinion. If you put good passion into it, take your time and do your very best work, someone's going to like it. And that someone might help you get representation at the end of your first film. It might be enough that people earn, the film earns a profit, or
Even if no one
it gets
sees
big
it,
distribution.
the fact that you've made a feature film will make a difference for your career.
Absolutely.
So worth it, and good luck. Thanks for joining us tonight, and send us your questions so we can address them on the next one.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks for joining us today. If you like what you're hearing on the podcast, you'll love the Feature Filmmaker Academy, a program designed to teach anyone how to finance and finish a feature film.
There are many resources teaching you how to do a great job, but what they don't teach you is how to get the job in the first place.
You cannot have a career making feature films until you've made at least one. Anyone can make a feature film using our proven model.
It's risk-free. If you follow all the steps in the program, you'll finance and finish a feature film, or we'll give you your money back.
Learn more at invisiblemansion.com/feature filmmaker, or click the link in the show notes.
If you find this free resource valuable, we'd really appreciate it if you leave us a review or share it with another filmmaker. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.